record?
This thing going on?
Yeah, it's just recording.
Okay. Is it a good angle?
Yeah.
No, don't zoom.
Okay.
Is it on yet? It might cut you guys off.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Let me share welcome to the whole team all the way from Alberta. That's near Calgary, no?
Northern Calgary, yes.
You know, Greg, the rest of us.
Yeah.
So anyway, Bianca, Troy, Kiana, Adam, Doug, welcome. If I may use 1 minute, this is all about you today, so I'm only going to take 1 minute. So for the rest, for those that you don't know, a couple of years ago, one of our partners in the flower business told us about a case they had done with Harvard Business School that was rather interesting. They asked us whether they could use our name to be shared with Harvard, which they did. Then Harvard contacted us and said, oh, we have heard about your company and what you're doing, which includes all of us here. And we would like to take a look and see whether we can do a case on it. I think initially we were a bit reluctant, but then thinking of wanting to be a better organization and a more attractive organization for younger, not that you're not very young, but the younger generations to join us that we will need as we progress. We thought it could be a good opportunity. Let's do it. They did the case, which I don't know whether all of you have read. Won't be asking around, but I suppose most of you have. And then Phil and I went to Harvard, did the case. It was very interesting. And then sometime after, the University of Navarra Business School asked us whether they could use the case. We asked Harvard and they agreed. Anyway, after the case being used several times, we were told that they wanted to use it for a case competition, which maybe Dr. will explain later more inside of the case competition program, which I'm sure you know better than I do. Anyway, we were invited to the presentation of the finalists, and there were 4 universities out of 14, I think. All around the world, the 4 finalists were from Canada, which reflects education in Canada is doing something very well. It was Andrew West, Giuseppe, and myself had the pleasure and the honor of being there with some of the people of the jury. It was a very tough call to decide which presentation was better because they were all very good. But if one stand more as a breakthrough from all the others was Dynamite. So then we thought, well, they have done such a great job that only 3 of us were lucky enough to enjoy the presentation. So we decided, why don't we invite them? It's a little prize or little reward for the great job done. I don't know if this is all true or not, but I'm going to assume it is true that you had 24 hours when you were given the case. 24 hours later, you were in front of us presenting the case. Your faces look much more tired at that time than now. I think you slept much more this time than you slept when you were the first time around. In my view, I think that having the privilege of having me there, we thought that the privilege had to be shared with the rest of the people that have made the group what you have seen it is. Many here, many in other places, but I think we got a good representation of where we are. And without any more boring stuff from me, I think you're welcome. Thanks for coming. We're delighted to hear you again, some of us, and first time for the others. Well done.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you everyone for being here today. We'd just like to take a moment and thank you to Alvaro and your team and everyone for welcoming us yesterday and the day before, welcoming us to see your team firsthand and see everything that we've read about in the case in person. So we'd just like to remind you that, once again, like Alvaro said, we took 24 hours to do this case, and then we presented it at the University of Navarra there in Pamplona about a month ago. So We were fortunate enough to land first place in this competition against 16 international teams, like Alvaro mentioned. And just once again, we are very thankful for being here today. And now we're going to begin our presentation, and then we would welcome any questions at the end of the presentation from anyone here in the audience. So, let's get started. My name is Kiana. This is Troy, Bianca, and Adam, and we are Team Alberta Dynamite Consulting, here to help the Munoz Group with some of the issues they have been facing. So, the main problem that we have identified for you today is how does the Munoz Group achieve their revenue goals and remain sustainable in the long term? Well, the recommendation that we propose is to implement a full vertical integration of your supply chain and then in the future expand into new markets. The overall impact of all this will be that you'll meet your goal of 1.3 billion euros by the year 2020. Some of the key insights we've identified based on the case given to us is that you have a goal of owning 70% of your own production. In addition, you're facing some pressures to take costs out of the supply chain, and you've seen growth at about a 17% compound annual growth rate over the past 15 years. But you are facing some limited financial flexibility, which we took into account when making up this recommendation.
Prior to jumping into our recommendation, we wanted to get an idea of the financial position of the Munoz Group. Based on the financial information provided, the sales figure of 578 euros in 2013-2014, we did a benchmarking analysis based on some comparable peers. We have identified Delmont Group and Calavo as two publicly traded peers used for our benchmarking analysis. We looked at their sales and cash as a percentage of sales. It was just under 1% at year end that both these companies were reporting their cash balance. So from there, we deducted an assumption that the Munoz Group has approximately 5 million euros of cash on hand available for future growth opportunities. The key takeaway here is that Munoz Group lacks the financial flexibility and available cash to immediately pursue capital-intensive growth opportunities.
So in order to fully integrate and reduce some of those pressures and costs in your supply chain, we did an analysis. We went all the way from breeding to consuming. So consuming and retail is really looking at what retailers you are in, especially the Tesco deal that you had just bought into at the time. Moving and packing really just showcases your efficiency in logistics and the supply chain at your pack houses that we toured yesterday. But the really two big ones that we want to focus on is breeding and growing. So breeding currently is your competitive advantage. Having both innovation units, SNFL, as well as Citrus Genesis, to find those winning variants and increase the product quality for your consumers. So like I said, you have a network of partner programs and you have invested heavily in R&D to do this. Looking more at growing, you have over 500 citrus affiliates and over 300 grape affiliate growers that you currently work with around the world. And your goal is to increase that to own production to 70%. So really the key takeaway from this is that breeding and growing represents the largest areas to further integrate vertically for your company. Going back to the main problem, how can the Munoz Group achieve revenue goals and remain sustainable in the long run? We came up with a three-pronged approach. Like I said, your current competitive advantage is breeding. So the first prong of this approach is breed. And what we would like you to do is invest in DNA sequencing to further this and further the quality and the variance of your products. The second prong is grow. Growing is being able to reach that 70% owned production by joint ventures with your core growers that you currently have. And finally, the third prong, expand. Look into new markets in the US to be able to hit that 1.3 billion euro goal by 2020. So moving into breeding. Your current situation, you have both Citrus Genesis and SNFL, as I've said, both discovery through scientific development as well as mutation, and then acquisition through some of your membership fee-based schemes as well as your breeding partners. So you have 5 direct and 5 indirect breeding partners. What we really want to focus on this slide though is that hypothetical breeding timeline. Going from cross of seedlings all the way to first commercial volumes can take over 26 years for your company. Our key takeaway from this is that Munoz Group has a very large time lag in the breeding process, which really restricts that innovation that is your core competitive advantage. So with this understanding, we want you to buy DNA sequencing. So why we want you to do that is because it keeps you on the cutting edge of innovation. Currently, you do DNA sequencing to protect the rights of your variants, which takes 2 to 3 months to actually sequence. The hard part is actually sequencing the genes to be able to find the attributes and the markers that are able to, you can then crossbreed and actually create better, higher quality product. So what we would like you to do is actually invest in that to find those winning variants quicker. How we would like you to do this is purchase through biotechnology firm Illumina. Illumina is a leading developer of next generation sequencing in the US, and we would recommend you use some of your cash on hand to buy the HiSec 2500, which costs over 650,000 euros. But really, this is an investment in your future and in your competitive advantage, which is innovation. We would like you to train your cytogenesis and SNFL staff on the equipment. And then what you could also do is charge some of your breeding partners a cost to use to recoup some of that investment. Really, what we want to highlight is that DNA sequencing allows you to find those winning variants and spend less cost and time on the losing variants.
Jumping into the second phase, the grow. We analyzed your current production model. As you can see, we've identified it as a collaborative venture approach. You have over 923 citrus and grape growers spread across different continents in the world. This collaborative venture approach is really based off the sharing of intellectual property and production technology, where you identify these winning variants and provide these core and affiliate growers with the strains. The key takeaway here is that a large independent grower network leads to increased costs and difficulty protecting against infringement of the intellectual property that the Munoz Group possesses. Diving deeper into the supply chain economics, the farming component of your supply chain has a value add of 101 cents. From that, your gross margin is at 85 cents, which only 33 cents of that is attributable to the Munoz Group. That means over 61% is going to these third-party affiliate growers, and Munoz Group is only retaining 39%. The key takeaway here is that over 60% of the margin from the successful research and development dollars is being kept by third-party affiliate growers. What we recommend is a joint venture structure. As you can see, with the Munoz Group, we recommend initially going into Spain, Republic of South Africa, and the US for these joint ventures. That means approaching these core affiliate growers and seeking a partnership with them. Why you go about doing this is, one, it would increase towards your own production goal of over 70%. You would have greater control over the production process and maintaining that high quality and innovation that the Munoz Group is known for. As well, it'll protect and reduce against intellectual property infringement. By only providing these joint venture partners with the newest strains for production, you will ensure that it reduces the incentive to either sell off these strains or that they're better protecting against these strains being, say, stolen or otherwise infringed upon. As well, it'll reduce the upfront cash payment to growers. Currently, when you switch from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere, you have a negative cash on hand cycle. You have to make these upfront payments to these production facilities so that they will ship the product over to you. By using a joint venture approach, they will be a partner in the process and will no longer require that upfront payment for their products. How you go about doing this? We recommend that the Munoz Group brings the patented products to the partnership. That means that offering these new partners the winning variants, those patented products that really have that higher gross margin. That's the incentive for them to join the joint venture, as they will be making a higher bottom line as well by growing these new winning variants. As well, currently you have weekly and monthly reports that you collect through your production facilities. We recommend distributing these back to the farming component so that they know on a weekly and monthly basis where they can improve upon and cut costs out or somewhere do a better job. Right now you distribute yearly reports or when there is a problem going on, and we recommend using this information, if it is available, to really give it back to them to see where they can improve. As well, we recommend using previous joint venture experience. It was successful through M&M Flowers, and we recommend using this model to really build upon the synergies that you can achieve through the joint venture structure. So what is the financial benefits of a joint venture partnership? As you can see, on the left-hand side there, that's your current model, where only 33 cents, or about 39%, is being kept by the Munoz Group. We recommend going into these new joint venture partnerships with at least a minimum of a 50-50 stake. Right off the bat, this will improve your gross margin from that 33 cents up to the 42.5 cents.
Alright, so getting into our last stage of the recommendation, which is the expand stage. We're going to talk about where we think the group would be best suited to expand a little bit more. We looked at 3 potential locations, the USA, Europe, and Asia, and we ultimately decided on the USA, and I'm going to tell you why. So first off, let's look at why we didn't choose Europe. So Europe, we thought it would be best for the group to avoid because we didn't want to overweight the business towards the UK and the EU. So in 2014, there was 82% of your revenue coming from the EU and UK, and we didn't want to cannibalize any of the profits or the success that you're having by trying to overdo it and keep expanding within the UK. As well, between 2004 and 2014, we saw and we looked up that there was diminishing revenue base in Europe over time, so we thought that might have been a bad outlook for Europe. And then the market is already saturated by many major players, so we didn't want you to compete with any other big competitors in the UK that you're already working against right now, as an example, junk fruits. Now, Asia was a very big consideration for us because there is a growing middle class in Asia, and it does have some potential opportunity, but we ultimately decided against it for 3 key reasons. The first is that in 2015, World Bank's Doing Business report ranked China as 90th in the world for ease of doing business. And when you compare this to the USA, which was 7th in the world, it really shows that China's a hard place to establish yourself in, as well as to grow and operate a business in. The second point is that high intellectual property infringement exists in China. So 80% of the infringement entering the USA is actually from China. And what we want to emphasize here is that your biggest competitive advantage is your intellectual property. It is the innovation that you have within your company. And to put that at risk by going to China is something that we just ultimately thought was a really bad idea for the group. And then we also looked at India. And India's food market has inadequate infrastructure, and they have a very risky and unpredictable climate, which would just overall be too much risk for your group. So the key takeaway here is that the revenue is highly concentrated already in Europe, and Asia poses a very large business risk to your intellectual property. So why ultimately did we choose the United States to go into? Well, it's from a few projections that we were able to research. The first is that the total food consumption is estimated to grow by $1 trillion by 2019, which will really help in your overall goal of $1.3 billion by 2020. And the second projection is that the food consumption year over year is growing at an increasing rate in the USA, up to 7% by 2019. So the key takeaway here that USA's food consumption projections are on the rise, and the environment does look beneficial for the group to go into the USA. So once you are in the USA, where do you want to put your products? We ultimately decided on Walmart as the place that would be best suited for you to start within the USA. And there's a few key reasons for this. First, if you look at the chart, you can see that there's 69.4% of the market share is dominated by Walmart right now, and their warehouse clubs and super centers. They are also the world's largest retailer and grocery chain by sales, so it really does get that opportunity to expand even further if you want to look elsewhere outside of the USA. And then as well, the industry is forecasted to expand by an annualized rate of 2.4% to over $500 billion by 2020, which again is really opportunistic and good for your overall goal of $1.3 billion revenue. So now that we've decided with Walmart, how are you going to actually get your products in the Walmart stores? So first we want you to remember what your sell to Walmart is. And after our recommendation, we have 2 main points that we think really stand out and would be beneficial to Walmart. The first is that DNA sequencing will lead to faster breeding times and better variants. So Walmart is all about getting their products in and out of the door as fast as they can. And with your DNA sequencing, that will really increase the time that they can give products to the customer and then get them out of the door. And that's something that would be really beneficial for their group. As well, you already have established connections with growers and experience with Costco in the USA and Canada as well. So this is a very good, reliable thing for you to bring up, that you can be relied on, that you are already successful in North America with Costco, and that it would be the same with Walmart. So to actually apply to be a supplier with Walmart, it's pretty simple. You ultimately just apply on their website, research. So pretty much they ask first for your basic company information, insurance, your tax ID, and then you have to be EDI compliant. And then from there you submit this electronic form, and they would contact you to set up further meetings to discuss the potential partnership. So our U.S. expansion strategy stretches over 5 years, and so we see the contract and the finalization of the talks with Walmart taking about 2 years. So we would hope that you have 250 stores across, I think, in California by year 3, and then by year 5, we hope that you expand upon that with 750 stores. Now, we see this as being a very conservative projection for you, seeing as there's over 3,500 Walmart supercenters in the USA as of 2015. So now that we've established the expansion into the US and specifically into Walmart, we can take a look at some of the specific locations in Walmart that you can start off in. So we recommend that in year 1 to 2, you go into California, as they do have 564 supercenters already set up there. So that would really help you establish that goal that Bianca mentioned of by year 5 having about 750 stores of presence. By year 3, we recommend that you look to surrounding states such as Washington and Oregon, as they do have quite a large number of Walmart supercenters already established there, and the target market fits as well. So they have a large proximity to a large population base in both California, in Washington, and in Oregon. In addition, Walmart's brand image is very well recognized, so it would really help you getting your products out there, getting them marketed with these everyday low prices. Moving on to where will the produce come from? Well, you currently have a facility in Fresno, California. At the time of the case, you also had some operations in Whittier, California, which I believe have now disbanded. But you can get your produce from those grapes in California, and this would really help cut costs of transportation, as you're already in the state of California, and it would also extend the shelf life of these citrus products, as you're just shipping them a few hours away from Fresno. And your other citrus can be sourced from the 4 core producers mentioned in the case that are also in the United States. And in the future, we recommend that you look at other joint ventures to source your further products. So moving along to the HR strategy of our recommendation. It's a 3-pronged strategy called Connect, Recruit, and Retain. So the first portion of it is Connect. This entails hiring 2 interns from local universities in the United States, particularly those universities that have a family business orientation or program or entrepreneurial programs. You would emphasize your company culture, emphasize retention, relationships, and dynamicism. In addition, you would initiate a 3-month rotational program called Revolve, where these interns can actually get a turn at working for HR for 3 months, then sales for 3 months, and then marketing, for example, or even in the legal aspects, so such as your intellectual property aspects, they can help out with that for 3 months. And why is this? So to maintain the family business values and also set the stage for these interns so that you can help grow them within the company. The second part is recruit. So who would you be recruiting? Well, young intellectual interns such as ourselves. And we recommend, like I said, some family business oriented universities such as Wisconsin School of Business, Kellogg School of Business, both of these in the United States, HAS, or even Stanford, Mr. Alvaro Munoz's alma mater. And how would you do this? You would do this through Career Connect portals, which are already set up online at all of these universities, and really emphasize the innovative processes that Munoz Group brings to the table. You're not just a citrus fruit company, you're very innovative. You have citrus genesis, you have grapes, you've been working so hard for the past 15 years to grow this company, and we ourselves have seen that yesterday by meeting all of these executives here, and just seeing the synergies between all of the different departments, and the amount of growth is amazing. So really emphasizing that will attract all this new talent. And why do we recommend this? Just once again, to show that you're a revolutionary player in the business world and to attract talent with the best fit. So the third aspect would be the retain aspect. You really want to make sure that you're retaining these employees, as in the case that was a bit of an issue in the Americas. You would retain the current employees, the interns, and potentially fly some people from the EU over to the US to help train these interns, help interact with them. And we recommend participation in the Emerging Leaders Program. So this program would include incentives such as tuition assistance, advancement opportunities, and mentoring. So we've developed this Emerging Leaders Program with 2 different streams, one of them being for MBA students who would go through this as interns, and then the other one for undergraduates. So they have 2 different levels. Level 1 would be for undergrads, and level 2 would be for the MBAs. You would also establish feedback surveys so that when these people go through the internships, they can actually give feedback on the company, what parts of it they liked, what parts of the Emerging Leaders Program they liked, and what you can adapt for future years to come.
And once again, just continually emphasizing the innovative processes that your company brings to the table. And this would be to diminish those labor turnover rates that you have seen in the past and really become a key player in career development opportunities. So the target market that we've identified for you today is mothers about 30 to 45 years old, so in the middle class bracket, who regularly shop at Walmart supercenters for their children and are always searching for that healthy alternative, so citrus fruits or grapes instead of junk food or other snacks. So you would market this through in-store produce displays and really tell the Munoz story. So tell them, how you're creating healthy options for their children and really appeal to these mothers in this target market. You could have slogans such as quick to pack, sweet to eat, or like we've seen, easy to peel for these children. In addition, we recommend some quality control. So having some salespeople potentially going into these supercenters and just keeping an eye out, making sure that there's a consistent supply and also the branding is kept consistent.
Okay, so going into the timeline of this recommendation, it goes from 1 month from now to year 2020. So 1 month from now, we would suggest you communicate these internal business model changes to your staff worldwide. So because you've seen so much growth over the past years, it's really expanded the whole group as a whole. And because of that, that may lead to some bad communication or some disconnected groups within the company. And it's really essential that the communication is clear and concise throughout the whole group of these changes so that everyone knows how it may affect their own job or their own employees' jobs. And then you would develop the HR strategy that Kiana just talked about. From 1 to 5 months, we would suggest that you implement the breed processes that Adam talked about. So that's the DNA sequencing and the buying of the Illumina. From 5 to 12 months, we would recommend that you implement the HR strategy, and then you would look into the potential joint ventures or the growth strategy that Troy talked about. And then you would also begin your discussions with Walmart as you see that taking a little while. Between 2 to 3 years, you would finalize the contract with Walmart stores, and you would begin selling your citrus fruits in Walmart or the expand stage that we talked about. And then from 4 to 5 years, you would expand into the more 750 Walmart stores, and then you would finalize those joint venture partnerships as we see that taking a little while to develop. And then by year 2020, we see this all coming together and hitting your goal of $1.3 billion in revenue by 2020.
Diving into the financial impact, we looked at the top line growth as well as keeping the expenses in mind due to the liquidity constraints of our assumption of 5 million euros of cash. So looking at top line growth, we really broke it down into organic growth, which is your existing segments here in the UK, other areas in Europe, and then the US expansion, which is the addition of this distribution through Walmart. So looking at top line growth, although you have been growing at about a 17% compound annual growth rate over the past 17 years, we forecast that that'll diminish with this new deal with Tesco. You won't really have that accelerated growth there. So we started at a 14.5% growth rate, diminishing by about 1% per year. For the US expansion, we project that it'll start in 2017 with those 250 stores. We looked at your current Tesco deal and found out the revenue attributable to each Tesco store that you have signed on, and we assume that you'd be making about approximately the same revenue in the US. So we use that multiplier about 250 stores at 90,000 euros per store to determine you have about 23 million in 2017, growing up to almost 72 million by 2019 for the US Walmart expansion. The main emphasis here is that your total revenue does reach that goal of 1.3 billion by 2020. Looking into the cost side of things, we did break it up into the different phases. So starting with the breed phase. The investment in DNA sequencing will have the cost of the Illumina machine and a few other overhead and staff expenditure costs, which we projected to be about 2 million euros in 2050. It diminishes down to about 1.25 million euros over the term of the DNA sequencing, just for continual investment in new staff, new variants, and additional costs that may be projected in there. Looking at the joint venture costs, we predict that you will have to contribute a bit of capital to these joint ventures, whether it's to expand farmland or to really increase their production capabilities to meet the quality and innovative standards that the Munoz Group does require. Looking at the US expansion, we allocated 2.5 million for contract discussions, making sure that you were EDI compliant, and any other associated costs to make sure that you were able to enter Walmart. with additional expenditures to really up the distribution network and make sure that you are able to successfully and efficiently serve Walmart to the highest standards. As well, we allocated some human resource costs and marketing expenditure costs. Branding is more important in the US, and really establishing the Munoz Group to have a brand will be important to ensure your long-term success and sustainability. The key side on the cost here is that it does fall under your €5 million cash balance, with leaving you about a €2 million cash buffer in 2015. As you can see, because you're going through the joint venture structure, you will reduce that negative cash on hand cycle in the Southern Hemisphere, which we predict will help your cash balance at year end up to around 2% by 2019, leaving you a good buffer for future expansion opportunities and growth. The metrics to measure the success of this recommendation we've broken down into 3 main items. The first is that €1.3 billion revenue goal by 2020, which will be achieved through the mix of the breeding, grow, and the expand. The second is the 70% owned production. Ensuring that quality and innovation is there will be key through the joint venture program. And the third is to measure the success of the US expansion, ensuring by 2020 that you are in those 750 Walmart locations.
So we've identified 4 key risks to this implementation that we see could be possible. So the first risk is that Walmart doesn't want to partner with their group. So the trigger to this risk could be that the contract takes longer than anticipated to finalize. And what we would suggest to you is that you would not look at Walmart anymore, and then you would mitigate this risk by looking into the supermarkets Kroger or Albertsons, which are also very prominent in the USA. They are different sized supermarkets, but they do attract that same target market, which we think would still be very successful for your company. The second risk is that the joint ventures also take longer to form than anticipated. The trigger to this would be that the core growers do not accept these partnerships, and our mitigation is to simply keep trying. It's to keep building these relationships, as we know that joint ventures do take a lot of time to build trust and to build that communication, and we don't think it's worth just throwing that away right away, and then you'd be able to finalize that 5 years from now by 2020. Third risk is that the DNA sequencing has hidden costs. The trigger to this could be that the costs are more than the 650 euros or 1,000 euros that we anticipate it being. And the mitigation to this could be to utilize a cash safety margin to fund. The fourth risk is that it's hard to retain employees in the US within the first 2 years. The trigger to this could be it's a high turnover rate or higher than 15%. And the mitigation we see for this is that you would partner with Costco or Walmart to implement that emerging leaders program faster than we had originally anticipated in the timeline that I went through. So to go over what we talked about today, we introduced the overall problem that we found from the case, which was how to achieve revenue goals and remain sustainable in the long term for the Munoz Group. The recommendation we came to you today with was full vertical integration of the supply chain and new market expansion. We broke that recommendation into 3 key components, being breeding, which is the DNA sequencing, growing through joint ventures, and expanding into the US. And we ultimately think that that will be able to help you reach your 1.3 billion euros of revenue by 2020, which was the overall goal from this case. Now, with that being said, we are so thankful and grateful to be here today. This was an amazing opportunity for us. We've never experienced anything like this before, especially presenting to so many highly qualified people about their own company. So with that, I'd like to thank you and open the floor to any questions.
Hi. Can I start?
Sure.
Oh.
You're starting with a lot of experience.
Yeah. The $650,000, does that buy the company or just the machine?
That buys the machine. Illumina
right.
is a $20 billion company, and
Yeah.
they're one of the leaders in next generation sequencing based out of the US, so it would just buy the machine, but we did add in extra additional costs for training, for resources to actually be able to get Illumina to train you and additional supplies.
No, I'm so impressed that business students managed to home in on DNA sequencing as the key way to speed up breeding. I mean, that's fantastic. We've taken the step of going down to extracting our own DNA, but we can't do the sequencing because it's $650,000. But what we will do is we're sending our molecular biologist, Ivan, to visit Illumina and just to have a look at that and thoroughly investigate whether it makes sense for us to make that investment or whether we should continue to outsource the sequencing. Because clearly we're successful at breeding, we're successful at developing the IP that then generates the attraction for the JVs and so on. We've got to speed it up if we're going to make it faster. And the only way we're going to do that is through molecular markers, which we're already using. But you know, in-house gene sequencing would certainly give us an edge. It's a big question as to whether we can afford to do that against outsourcing it. But for sure, following your recommendation, we will have Ivan Karenio, our molecular biologist, visiting Illumina to see what happens. So thank you for that.
I actually have a question that's related to this. First of all, well done. If this is what you figured out in 24 hours, and John and I were talking last night, we've been here for years and we're still not exactly sure which direction we're going.
I didn't say that, that's what you said.
But I think this is proof that absolutely Canada has the best business schools in the world. Okay, yeah. With the DNA sequencing, because I was interested in this company as well, but are there other unforeseen synergies, perhaps, that they go in different directions, not just sort of our core breeding? Are there other products, for example, that we could branch out into?
Well, certainly if we had DNA sequencing capability, we could sell that to other breeding programs working on different crops and so on. There's a whole host of things that would be our R&D division might be somewhat bigger than our sales division then, which I think it should be anyway. But yeah.
So you agree with that?
That was something, yeah, and we did work in the idea that you could recoup some of that investment by actually charging your breeding program partners to get that investment back. We did look into some alternatives for you. So I think really we looked at three of the largest other competitors. So we looked at Agilent Technologies in the US, and they can provide out-of-house lab services. So currently it's not necessarily, the cost of DNA sequencing has gone down quite substantially, but it's the fact that not a lot of labs have the capacity to DNA sequence the amount that you would actually need. So that's why we didn't really look there. We did look at other larger companies, Thermo Fisher, who were forming Life Technologies. They have a considerable product to Illumina, as well as working with IBM through a partnership. But really, what we focused in on is that Illumina has sequencing by synthesis and has some of next generation sequencing that's above everyone else. So in that sense, we thought it'd be a great recommendation to have it in-house and to fully vertically integrate through that.
I'd just like to echo what Greg said. I thought it was a superb presentation, very clearly argued and a very logical train of thought, so thank you for that. You mentioned in your risks the possibility of growers rejecting the joint venture proposal, and it seems to me that what you're advocating is effectively a margin grab in return for the promise of access to the new varieties. And I wonder if that is sufficiently compelling a case, and whether you think there are any other factors that could make that argument more compelling to convince growers to come on board.
Yeah, for sure. So the initial argument was just going from a generic strain to the patented product. The margin is quite an increase there. As well, it can be through this partnership of providing that consistent information on ways that they can improve their own farming capabilities. So really, it's trying to give back through the supply chain, taking the information that you get by providing these products down to the consumers, and really giving it back to these farmers who don't have that direct interaction. We believe both the margin impact and the intellectual impact will be sufficient for them to be interested in this 50-50 partnership.
Okay, but you do have it as a risk that they may not. And I suppose so I take from that that you do see some potential resistance there.
Yeah, for sure. Starting initially, you are taking that margin away, but we don't think that your group should go less than a 50-50 partnership. We think it's important to have that control in the farming process. It is your intellectual property that you are handing down there for these variants to be growing, so it may take a little longer. You might have to provide more, say, of a cash upfront payment for them to improve their facilities and their growing areas. but we believe that being persistent there and trying to work and negotiate the best deal for Munoz Group.
Absolutely.
So just to be clear, so your argument there is that if the IP is good enough, if the new varieties are really attractive to potential partners, that leverages up our stake in the JV, or could do.
That'll be part of the negotiation process of how you want to work out the terms of the deal. So that key.
With again, like everybody else, it's very, very impressive, particularly in such a short time frame of you being able to produce something from just reading it 24 hours or so. In terms of the growth or the expansion plan, so you spoke a bit about the risk around growing with Walmart, and then there is obviously the further opportunity if it was with Albertsons or with Kruger. With Asia being such a massive market, and at the moment perhaps not as established or as mature as other markets, and with a growing middle class and growing affluence, would it not at the same time be beneficial to start getting a foothold there as that market develops, rather than with that's what you're suggesting, but a heavy focus into the US? And also when you look at Europe, which sort of agree that in terms of the overweighting and to be cautious of, but if we continue to grow also in Europe, it does enable us to consolidate our supply chains and make our supply into Europe more efficient. So would it be that it would be an expansion heavily focused on Walmart, or should it be that there's footholds and there's some expansion plans in other markets to mitigate some of the risk?
I think the way that we took the case and the recommendation was to fully focus on the United States at first. We didn't want to put the company at too many different places and spread yourselves too thin. We did look in more deeply into why not Asia, and we can bring up that slide. And there were quite a few reasons as to why right now was not very appealing. You know, as you mentioned, property infringement was our key takeaway for China. As well, things such as the rural poor is still the greatest part of the population, and that's projected to continue until 2022, which may not be the target market that you're looking for. As well, another big thing was that there is very little market knowledge for Asia within your company, and because that could carry a lot of risk, and that would mean that you have to put your trust into somebody else that isn't with the company. So we thought that, you know, because your company is so tight, you do like to promote from within and things of that nature, it just wasn't that attractive. We do think that you should keep your eye on Asia. That's definitely a growing population, and the middle class is growing. But just currently, we didn't think that it met the needs of your company.
Okay.
I have another question. You rightly keyed in on marketing being very important in North America and the US market. So I assume in those 24 hours you would have done some research on the company. So my question is, what did you think of the website? What did you learn from the website? I guess the North American one is, or the whole thing, the whole group. And the second question is, how important do you think that is to have sort of an online presence in the US market?
We definitely think it's very important in the U.S. market. In North America in general, a lot of things have transitioned to online information. So we've taken a look at your website. We do believe that it's got a great start. It's very, it has a modern look to it. We've taken a look at the career section, available careers. We think that there could be a little bit more information just to entice these interns, especially if you do introduce the Emerging Leaders program later on. Just really marketing that program would be a great start to, a great addition to the website. In addition, you can have a little bit more information about the different roles that your company offers, especially if you are going to be expanding into North America or into the USA, just kind of marketing the different positions that are available there.
So that's from sort of a recruitment, so the millennials will go online and they'll check out companies. What about from the consumer point of view? If they're buying produce, do they look for brands in North America?
Yes.
And then what about businesses? Will they also investigate in the same way?
Definitely, and digital is a huge aspect to any brand now, and to have that digital presence. So we do think that it would be important to actually develop a brand in the United States. Currently, when I go into a shopping center, even in Canada, a lot of it's just commodity, but it would be very enticing to have a solid brand that I could research and know what's going into these oranges and know where they're grown and things like that. So having that information on your website, possibly doing a rebrand of that website to have it more simplified, to have it maybe a one-pager version that's very popular now, to be able to give that information to your consumers, especially in the millennial age range where they go online, they go to digital right away. So look for that.
I think Adam's completely right. And looking from a product standpoint, I did some research within the 24 hours of different oranges or mandarin oranges that are marketed throughout the States. And there's one brand, I think it's Wonderful or Cuties or something like that, and they spend $20 million a year on marketing. And it's very recognizable within our supermarkets. It's very easy for mothers to be attracted to that. And I think that's something that I know that that's a huge budget, but if you can start something like that in the U.S. and really just establish yourself, I think that's kind of the path you need to play because it is all about brand image in the States.
Yeah, we did get a chance to look yesterday at the Jaffa brand and the different marketing campaigns that have been developed there in the UK. So, for example, the rugby team, and in addition, some that kind of appeal to children. So, having a healthy option there. So we did look at that and kind of think, that could be applied in North America and that could be applied in the United States, for example. So even if you take some ideas from the Jaffa brand specifically, so from Lorna, and apply it onto your website there in the United States, yeah, that'd be a very good idea.
Thank you very much.
I have a question. So following on from that conversation, in our experience, sustainability is relatively low on the agenda for US customers. And I'm wondering if you think the work we do in Europe and in the UK with our customers is something that could be used as a point of difference into the US market.
I think for sure. I think, well, from our experience in Canada, sustainability is actually a very prominent topic of conversation, and especially with mothers who are looking for the best product for their children. I think that's something that you can definitely market and you can use to your advantage. There are other companies, especially that are with Walmart, that don't focus on sustainability. So that could be a really big distinguishing aspect to your group that could help you in expansion for sure.
Prior to doing this cake, I don't know whether you had much understanding or had ever spent any looking at a produce company. Possibly not, yeah. But in going back to the sort of website and recruitment and that sort of thing, so where there are talented graduates coming out of university like yourselves who have clearly picked up on the innovation and those aspects, are there things that surprised you about our industry, and are there things that we should do, although we can go on the website, but had you not done this case you probably wouldn't have gone onto our website? Are there things that we should be doing that make our industry and our business look really appealing compared to what might be considered more attractive corporate, if it's Apple or whoever, but bigger corporations, so that we can attract the best talent?
Yeah, definitely. So right now there's kind of like this health trend, at least occurring in North America. I've seen it in Europe as well. So everyone's kind of trying to get healthy, trying to get active, and substituting junk food for these healthy alternatives. So I think piggybacking on that and really implementing that would be really beneficial, whether it's online, such as the Jaffa marketing campaign. So going to different rugby games and handing out these oranges. So really piggybacking on active lifestyles and pairing that with your healthy product would be beneficial to your company.
I think as well, talking about how you would attract yourself to people like us.
Yeah.
I think innovation is key, and it's super exciting for people of our age. I studied entrepreneurship in university. That was my major for a while, and I loved it. And people like the idea of joining a young, innovative company, and I don't know if that's stressed enough on the website. We got a huge insight to that yesterday, and it's too bad we did this case a month ago and not yesterday after learning everything, but it's amazing the different departments that you have and the innovation that goes into every single product, and it's not simply an orange as it said in the case. And I think that is what needs to be stressed, is the innovation, the entrepreneurial aspect of the company. Even though it's big, it's still there and it's still strong, and that's what not kids, adults like us would like to experience. We want that growth and that opportunity to use our different strengths in a company, and that's something that that could be, advertised even through a video, just a cool little collective, this is our company, this is what we do, these are our innovative departments, and it's not just the produce, it's this whole process that you don't know about.
Yeah.
I think that's something that could really connect people like us who wouldn't necessarily see this website if we had just searched for it.
Had you prior to it, you had just thought that an orange is an orange?
Yeah, honestly, yeah. Like I had no idea what went into fruit until yesterday, until we saw these warehouses, until we saw, the quality and the inspection that goes into everything. The logistics are insane. We had no idea everything that went into this process, and I think that that's a really big opportunity for people like us who are just graduating to experience, but you don't know that unless you understand the whole company.
Yeah, adding to that, I think we were really surprised by how flat the organization is and how it is all about being nimble and staying true to your roots of being entrepreneurs. And from our standpoint, we didn't see that back end and behind the scenes of how it actually is all done through the whole supply chain. I think that was really interesting. For me, when I graduate, I want to work for a company that's, you don't know what you're doing the next day or the next week, and it's constantly changing. And I think that's what needs to be stressed, is that innovation and is that ability to be constantly challenged when you can graduate. So doing something online, like Bianca said, through a video, or even rebranding and updating that website to showcase and consolidate all the groups onto that, and showcase what's actually being done would be a huge advantage.
I have one other question. You very prudently, I think, constrained yourselves to within your estimate of what the available cash in the business is. And I think that's fantastic, rather than simply splurge away. But of course, with the cost of borrowing so low as it is at the moment, I just wondered, was that a self-imposed constraint, or was it something that was set when you embarked on the study?
Yeah, for sure. So when we started looking at a recommendation, we didn't have the available financial information. So we wanted to make sure any recommendation that we did provide was feasible for the Munoz Group. So with cost of borrowing being so low and depending on your capital structure, you could look at borrowing if you can service the cost of this debt, and the growth will be there to repay these debts when they do mature. But based off our limited knowledge and looking at your peers, we thought that they had very little cash on hand, and we didn't have insight into your capital structure. So we thought it would be safer to, grow within your means and limit yourself rather than splurging and not being able to afford this plan.
Well done.
One question for me. If I remember correct, the order that you did in Navarra, you were the first group out of the 4.
We were.
And if I remember correct, that meant that you could see the presentations that came after you.
Yes.
Which were very nice. Yours was the best, as you know, because you won. But is there anything of the other 3 that you thought, oh, well, that's a good point that we could have included in ours? The answer could be no.
We saw one group that touched on packaging quite a bit, and we thought going into the U.S., building that brand name is important. It would be important to go about a different method of packaging. So as we saw through the Jaffa yesterday, where it has that brand name right up front, so that every time you go back to the supermarket, you're grabbing that bag of Jaffa oranges. So that's one thing with the available cash would be to do the branding and that packaging. So when a consumer goes in, they're looking for that exact label, product, and image every time.
Yeah, definitely. We thought that based on our estimates of $5 million and similar peers of like Palm, who spent $20 million on an advertising campaign to actually brand in the US, that it wasn't feasible. But that'd be something from a marketing aspect to actually brand it and know what you're buying on.
You did all this in 24 hours?
Yes.
You didn't have a back office in China?
Very little sleep.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be waiting over a weekend for a note anymore.
Alvaro shouldn't see this.
Yeah, no, I feel the pressure in the room. I've known the Munoz Group for 24 years, so what you've done in 24 hours is an outstanding piece of work. And you should be very proud of that. hopefully now we're going to break, I think, once Alvaro will say a few words. We'll enjoy chatting with the guys over a sandwich. Well done.
Thank you.
Really impressive.
Well, not much more to say than thank you, well done. Very impressive, 24 hours. I think that now everybody knows what our standard is. We need to prepare this, we've got 24 hours to do. No, I think that 2 or 3 things that I experienced before, I experience again today, is to have someone of your young age coming in, looking at the business and being able to get so clear views and conclusions, which most of the plan that you have put is pretty much what we're doing. And it takes us a lot of hours. Greg and John were saying we've been thinking about it for years and we're still not clear. We're never clear enough. That's an attitude we take, never be complacent, redo everything every morning. But no, but to see what you have proposed, it's very close to what we're doing. And it's good to see that somebody looking from outside and from limited information is getting to the same conclusion or the same plan that we have. I think that if you have given a new standard to ourselves, is that what can be done in a very short time coming from outside, so we will incorporate that. I think that if someone specifically is going to have a big task list out of this, is the HR and Andrew department. Obviously there is a lot to be done and a lot of things that we can do, and I think an exciting thing to hear from you, and that goes for all of us that spend our life working here, is listening to 4 young people at one of the brightest part of life, and life can be bright all throughout, but at that age, everything is to be happening, etc. To get so excited about what we do, it's quite exciting because it reconforts of what we're doing, quite an exciting thing. Health is something that people and consumers are thinking more about. We hear it all the time, everywhere, more and more. And what we want to bring is healthy products and healthier experiences to the people that we supply. So I think that we're in the right place at the right time with the right team and with the right structure. That doesn't mean that we're going to stop thinking about what to do tomorrow, but it's good to hear somebody from outside thinking the way you do and giving us the advice you have. For me, nothing else than saying thank you, and for the rest, I think that you will share with me that it was worth inviting them all the way from Canada, and I think it's really worthwhile to hear from all the people, especially younger generations coming through, that we're in a bloody exciting business if we know how to handle it well. I think that too many occasions people have thought at the produce business like, oh, boring and old stuff, and when you don't know what to do, you get to produce. No, with us. We love what we do, and we're going to revolutionize the world going forward with all of you on board. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.